meeting to order. Begin by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, please, if you would take your seat.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And Mr. Dale, if you would take attendance, please.
Yes. Kathy Postlethwaite,
Present.
Jocelyn Hinshaw,
Present.
Steve Mundy,
Present.
Josh Fedor,
Present.
Chris Lake,
Present.
all present.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the April 11th, 2024 minutes. Have you all had a chance to read? And are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, the chair is open to a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second? Thank you. Is that better? It's my husband in the back of the room. Okay.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Henshaw. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We have on our agenda two petitions, which are the petitioners have asked for a continuance, and they are, first off, petition number 2024-19-DSV, Harris FLP, and they have asked for a continuance to the July 3rd, 2024 meeting. And there is no vote required. We will simply continue them until our next meeting. Secondly is petition number 2024-13-DSV, Edward Murray. They've also asked for a continuance to the meeting in July, and we will, no vote required, we will continue that petition. Last in our list of continuances is petition number 2024-04-UV, and this is Denise Katz. This matter has already been continued. This is a second request. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Smith if you might fill us in if there are any information that we need to have about this request for continuance.
The only additional information, and I'm not sure if Mike has this letter, but I did receive a letter from Mike that I'm going to provide to you. As you mentioned, this is the second request, so it's not guaranteed approval. You will need to decide as the board if you're willing to accept this continuance. If you're willing to accept it, it'll go to the July agenda. If you are unwilling to continue this, then you have to take some sort of action tonight. So if you have any questions, I'll happily answer them, but I'm going to pass these out for you guys.
Right.
So I have a question for our council. If we were to continue it again, are we allowed to have remonstrators speak tonight? We've already opened it and had comment. The reason I ask is I know that one of the remonstrators will not be able to be present at the next meeting.
You just have to take that into consideration and just in your discussion on whether to grant the continuance.
Okay, so we can allow additional discussion even though we've already opened it for public comment once?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think it's all or none.
Okay.
So perhaps it would make sense to have the petitioner or the petitioner's representative speak about the continuance, please.
Thank you. Matt Price here tonight on behalf of Denise Katz. You may recall that
Please
earlier.
give us your address, Matt.
Oh, okay. I'll give you my my office address, 10 West Market Street, Indianapolis, Indiana. Thank you. You may recall earlier this spring we had a very lengthy discussion about this particular proposal, and there were a lot of very legitimate concerns raised, including concerns by an adjoining property owner. There's a lot to absorb and deal with regard to those concerns and the project, which is also an important project more broadly in Boone County, serves as a important service provider to the Boone County Sheriff's Department. You may recall that the Boone County Sheriff testified at that hearing as well. We have been actively working with the property owner, Dr. Katz, to make material revisions to the proposal. We believe that in order to more fully present those and certainly discuss those with the adjoining property owners, that we need additional time to do that. And I've only learned just very recently that Mr. Andreoli's been retained, and I would certainly commit to you that he and I will discuss the revised proposal before we return back to you should this be continued. But we really feel like it's a critical amount of additional time we need in order to have a thoughtful decision made on a very important case.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Mr. Andreoli, do you have anything to add? You're representing one of the remonstrators.
Yes, thank you. For the record, Mike Andreoli, 1393 West Oak Street, Zionsville, Indiana. I represent Mr. and Mrs. Nelson, who are really, truly the most affected property owner, who live very, very close to this proposed large kennel that's requesting a use variance. I submitted a letter to staff of recent vintage. You may not have had an opportunity to review it, but I would urge you to review that, because it raises substantial legal issues with regard to what the requirements are that have not yet been sought for any type of waiver or variance as it relates to setbacks that should be pertain to this particular large kennel. Those legal requirements, we think, are consistent with the position that staff has taken in the past with other developments, and that those should be included, and that needs to be either sought by way of variance or we believe that as we move forward, they may not be able to be met as it relates to this particular property. Notwithstanding all of that, as I mentioned to Mr. Price, we're not going to raise an objection to you with regard to continuance. We'll leave that up to your good graces. I told him I would not formally object to a continuance. I've not had an opportunity to talk with him about this before I submitted it, so he may not have even have seen my my treatise on this up to this particular point in time. So,
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andreoli. Is there any discussion here among the board members regarding this continuance?
I mean, I think it'd be good if both councils had a chance to talk on the matter and maybe reach a resolution before they come back to us.
Okay. Agreed. Further?
I agree.
Do we have a motion then?
I move to continue the matter to the July 3rd meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Monday? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, it will be continued until the July meeting. Thank you very much. All right, on our agenda, the next item, we have two petitions that were continued from the June, or I have to think about May meeting because we did not meet. The first of those is docket number 2024-11-DSV, Charles Ney, and we will start just as a matter of principle. What the procedure here is that we will first start with the staff report on any of these petitions, and then there is a 15-minute period allotted for the petitioner or other advocates to speak on behalf of the petition. There's also, following that, a 15-minute period for remonstrators to speak in opposition, and then a 5-minute period for a rebuttal or further comments by the petitioner, and 5 minutes for further comment by remonstrators. Mr. Rust, there in the back, is that Joe? Yes? If you'll wave your arms if we have anybody online who is wishing to speak, we'd appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, we'll start with this. Mr. Smith, do you have a staff report on this first petition, please?
Yes. As I speak, I'm going to give you a aerial map that the petitioner sent me yesterday. I said I would hand this out to you, so I'm going to let y'all pass it down the line while I give it. And if you could switch on the PowerPoint for me, I would appreciate it. Thank you. So this is, as you mentioned, a development standard variance, section 194082. As you can see on the screen, requires lots to have a lot depth to width ratio no greater than 3:1. Here is what is currently proposed. It is kind of small, so as we get into it, I can pull up the PDF and make it a little bit larger. Either way, my notes are at the bottom. Doing the math, the lot is roughly 1,500 feet deep, and at the road frontage, it is around 127, which produces a ratio of around 1:11, which exceeds the 3:1 depth to width ratio. That is what they are here requesting, is a variance from table 3 of the 3:1 lot depth to width ratio. Staff believes, based off the self-created nature of this issue, they do not meet the findings required for a development standard variance. And because of those findings, that is why staff offered an unfavorable recommendation. If you have any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, would you confirm again what the depth to width ratio is that they would have if the property went forward as is?
So here's what I have. You can see it on your screen. I'll make my picture smaller and my numbers a little bit bigger. We measure the width at the road frontage. So even though there's a wider piece toward the back, we have to measure the width at the road frontage. That is roughly 128 feet, give or take. The depth we have to measure is obviously the longest line there, 294, 741, and 447, for a total of 1,483. And if I can pull up, if you'll give me a minute to pull up the PDF, you'll see that a little bit better than what's on the PowerPoint. So here, I'll zoom in for you on the screen. You'll see 91 and then 36, so roughly 128. And then the depth is 447, 741, and 294. And if this is approved, the end result will be a brand-new single-family home, as you can see, constructed on the back part of the new created parcel. There was some questions and discussions about the proposed property being landlocked. Staff looked into that, and happy to answer any questions you have related to that, but summarizing, historically our staff has interpreted parcels that are connected or touching, adjoining, of same ownership are considered to have frontage. And so that parcel and this land fell into that category to where technically it was not a landlocked piece of property, which was one of the elements as to how staff got to the unfavorable recommendation as well.
Okay, just to be clear, in the staff analysis that I'm looking at, you have the depth to width ratio of 6:1, but it's actually 11:1?
Yeah, so I took the 6:1 from the paperwork. I assume it was probably a number derived from the widest part of the parcel. But as I was going through it after the staff report, getting ready for this meeting, I redid the math and added it all up, and it's actually closer to 11:1.
Okay, thank you.
So if they, instead of laying this out like a flag lot, just had a parcel in the back that they carved out from the other property, and had an access easement across the northern property to that piece of land. Would that be acceptable, or?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of questions specifically related to access easements, right? So Mike has drafted some qualifications essentially for access easements, but as long as they aligned with what Mike put together as far as those access easements, then yes, they could. It has to have a certain amount of width, has to be open to the public. You know, there was a list, I don't have it right here in front of me.
Okay.
But as long as that easement met that qualification, then they would be fine.
Okay.
And the staff's position in terms of non-supporting this, has that changed from the report that we got in our packet?
No, at the end of the day, the way the properties are currently positioned, there was not a unique condition on the site. Staff believes this subdivision and the problem being created is only a result of the petitioner's actions and desire for a new home, right? It's not a unique condition related to an easement or some sort of geographical issue. We thought maybe there was some landlocked problems, right? Maybe there's landlocked issues, but when we saw that the adjoining property was actually owned by the same owner, it really technically wasn't landlocked. So there wasn't any unique conditions that we could find relative to a zoning standpoint that would give us the ability to get to hardship. And so that's how we have the unfavorable recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
And the total lot size is under 3 acres. We're looking at 2.8, is that correct? Because
Yeah, I
I'm
had
looking
it 2.80.
Parcel
Yes.
1 and lot 1 are the two that,
Yeah. Parcel 1's 1.1 and parcel 2, I don't have my glasses. but-
1.622.
1.62, comes to 2.8, okay.
Okay. Further questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, we'll ask for the petitioner. If you would give your name and address, please, and then you have 15 minutes to.
Understood.
Okay.
My name's Adam Dehart. I'm project manager with Keeler Webb Associates. Our offices are at 486 Gradle Drive, Carmel, Indiana, 46032. With me this evening is one of the property owners and petitioners of this petition, Mr. Charles Nye. Could I get the parcel map that I sent to you up on the screen?
Yes.
And there is certainly some confusion about the ratio. The ratio is 6-to-1, and I'll explain that here in a few minutes as I walk you through some of the history on the site and the exact configuration of the parcels. It's a little bit of a confusing situation here because I have two different property owners that have had several land swaps in the past, and I'll give you that history to try to make their properties function best for them. And this is a third or fourth iteration of that as time has gone by between two very close friends and neighbors. The parcel that we're primarily talking about, is there any way I can point on the map, or have you got a cursor that you can point with?
I can use my, my pointer here.
Yeah.
You want to zoom in further, too? There you go. Thank you.
And then we're over to the right. There you go.
Is that good, Chris?
And
Yeah,
down a
just-
little, right
there
there.
you go.
That-
Yeah.
that's-
Perfect,
That's
right there.
great.
Yep.
So if you could put the cursor on the Nye property, which is in the top left-hand corner, right there. Mr. Nye owns that. He bought that in 2019. The Crafts bought the property immediately to the east that includes the house and the horse farm and the barn. They bought that in 2016. Mr. Nye also bought in 2019 the L-shaped property south of his existing home, that piece right there. And then over the course of time, there's been a need for the Nyes and the Crafts to work together on the development of the property. The Craft property is zoned ag. It's the only ag piece in the area. The remaining of the property to the northeast and south of us is all zoned R1. On the south and east sides of the Craft and Nye property is the recently made into the park sanctuary. It used to be the golf club. And then the property to the west of us, it used to be owned by the school, is now a farm. Over the course of time, like I said, there's been some changes out there. The barn has been increased, so, and the need for horse pasture has increased. So Mr. Nye actually sold the L-shaped piece of property to the Crafts so that they could have more pasture and room for horses. A couple years ago, they increased the size of the barn. Barns is an accessory structure, and ag property needs to have a 100-foot buffer area. So in the bottom right-hand corner, in the far southeast corner of the Nye property, you see a teeny tiny little parcel right there. That was swapped between the property owners so that that barn could stay in compliance. I'd also might add, since Mr. Nye's moved into the property, on top of being close friends, he's a part-time caretaker of the horses and the barns. So this is a mutual, everybody gets to work together here on their facility, and that explains some of the land swaps that have occurred over time. If we could go back to the, and you'll note too, on a lot of these lots, quite a few of them are deep. They're going back to section corners as property has been split off over time. And then if we could go to our site plan there, Mr. Smith. And then zoom up about halfway on the west property line. And scroll down, please, sir. Okay, on the top right-hand corner, you can see the existing house, detached garage, and accessory structure barn that's on the Nye property. The area that is designated parcel 1 is current Nye property. And then if we could scroll down. The property, everything south of where it says Lot 1 is currently owned by the Crafts. So that's where we come in with 2 petitioners working together to split property to create this parcel. The need for the parcel and creating the need for a new home, we've done extensive work up front where we've been able to determine what size house fits there, whether or not we can have a well on the site. We've gone to the time and expense to look and see if we can have septic field. We've had a soils report that's come back in a positive manner that we can have septic on this site because city waters and sewers are literally miles away from this location that's at the far extreme north end of the Zionsville zoning jurisdiction. So we've really done our due diligence to look and try to make this particular situation work. Mr. Nye's children have left the home, so he's basically an empty nester now. That's a really large house that they're in currently, and he'd like to downsize and actually have his house closer to the barn facility to help caretake the horses. So I think this history is important when we're looking at the situation here, because it's not like we're just trying to create an extra lot to make some money over the situation. We're still trying to preserve the rural and the ag and the horse farm type nature of the area. In regards to the existing depth ratio, the true depth ratio on the total parcel that's involved here is 741 feet. And that complies with Mr. Smith's staff report. Unfortunately, he took the 741, which is an overall dimension, and added the portion that's the craft portion at 294, and then added the other one that's on the Nye property at 441. So it doubled the size. Our true ratio that we're asking for a variance from is 6-to-1, not 11-to-1. Is everybody clear on that?
No,
Sorry about that.
No, it's perfectly fine.
it's good.
On
Very
my
correct.
survey dimension, you generally dimension property lines in the middle of the property line, and the 741 is an overall dimension. So that is our depth number to look at on our ratio.
I see.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure that clear because I think that's really important in
I
what we're
think it
trying to
is too.
accomplish here.
Thank you.
In addition to that, when you look at the front part of the property, we're on a limited access portion part of State Road 32. I'm sure everybody can recognize that State Road 32 and 421 are not going to continue to look and act the way they are today as the area develops. We've already seen quite a bit of changes in there. That is also the reason for the irregular shape for the right-of-way grant that's taken place in the past, so that NDOT can provide right-of-way and street access for both the Nye and the Kraft properties. We have a large ravine right there off the within the right-of-way and through our property that we have to negotiate and work around. In the event that we do get this project approved, there is a small triangle area in the far northeast corner of the site that would function as an ingress-egress easement, because NDOT is not going to want us to, or will not allow another curb cut, so we have to share that curb cut between these two parcels. I'd like to point out also that this isn't by definition, in my opinion, a flag lot, because quite frequently flag lots are very narrow. We've configured this lot size so it is in full compliance of other requirements of the ordinance, particularly the frontage requirement of being minimum of 120 feet. I'd call your attention to the width of the lot being at the front setback line, and with the configuration of our new property, in the current configuration, the front setback line would be 30 feet off the existing right-of-way. But with the way we're building and constructing our lot, we're going, in our plat, is planned to pull that building setback line all the way back to the wider portion of the lot, so that the 30 feet would be 240 feet wide. Now, the reason I did that, assuming we get our variance approved, is that when we create the new lot configuration, that it is fully in compliant with the ordinance, because our lot width to depth ratio is exactly 3 to 1. So we've designed the configuration of the lot to be in compliance with the ordinance. We're just here today asking for relief because the current situation, the length to depth ratio is just over 6 to 1. Lastly, in conjunction with that, we did a little bit of research. Now, I'm not an attorney, but I can read English. We did a little research into Indiana Supreme Court case law and the 3 to 1 ratio situation. And I'm paraphrasing here because, like I said, I'm not an attorney. I'm sure your town attorney can pull up the case law and be much more versed in it. But the BZA is authorized by statute to grant a variance if the literal enforcement of the ordinance will result in unnecessary hardship, which is exactly what we're here asking for because we have an unusual hardship, so long as the action is not contrary to the public interest and spirit of the ordinance as preserved and substantial justice is done. Again, I'm paraphrasing what the Supreme Court ruling was on that, but we feel that complies with us. Lastly, we agree with the staff's position on the first two findings of fact as far as whether or not this variance will be injurious to the public health. We concur with the staff's findings on that particular item. We also concur with the staff's findings on the use and value of the area and the adjacent property. We disagree with staff's comments on whether or not a hardship is due here, and respectfully understand why staff had to write that into the report that way. I would like to add a couple words here because there's been some additional information that's came to light to myself on our findings. And then on the R1 zone property, my intention on that was not to be truly landlocked by property law, but the R1 property that is behind the existing Nye property, that L-shaped piece that we were showing you originally, that's still zoned R1. So there would be no access to be able to get to that R1 zone property. And then, so in my findings of fact, I would like to add the word R1 zone property in front of the landlocked comment. And then it's also come to my attention since we filed this project that the school corporation has since sold the western property to a farm, and it's a new name that's a Farm Incorporated. So I'd like to strike the Union School property from that for the current property owner.
Okay, thank you.
With that, we'd be available for any questions
Thank
you
you.
might have.
Questions for the petitioner?
You perhaps restate the unnecessary hardship that would be caused if this is denied? I mean, we have a copy of what you submitted. I'm having difficulty understanding how that's a hardship.
I understand your position. You know, the current condition of the property out there is a hardship to the owner, and the fact that he has a large, substantial home that doesn't suit his needs anymore because of the size of it. He's looking to downsize and have a facility that's closer to the horse barn so that he can be the assistant caretaker on the property. If it would help, I can read the findings on the last item so that we don't have to talk about having additions and subtractions to that, if that would help.
No,
Well,
I don't think that's necessary.
No, I agree. I think it's one of the considerations we must make, is in fact there an unnecessary hardship if it were denied. So it is one of the criteria that we use to make our decision. And I think as it's stated there, I mean, everything you said would probably be the way any of us felt if we were in his position. At the same time, I'd say, I'm not sure that you can deem that to be a hardship. It is not what you want, it's not what the petitioner wants, but is it truly a hardship?
So I think you're a month early. This falls under practical difficulty, which will be added to, hopefully added to the code in the very near future. Does your client own this new parcel yet? So right now, we have a parcel that currently is owned by a different landowner, so it is in fact landlocked. Even though if it gets replatted like this, then your client will purchase it.
Correct.
So it's currently owned by the neighbor, is it the cats? They're not the cats, the crafts. So it's currently, they're neighbors, and the
Okay.
property that he does not own is currently owned by the neighbor.
Okay, and so
And the
because it's
neighbor
attached to the
adjoins
neighbor's
it,
property, okay.
So regardless of who owns it, it's either going to adjoin the petitioner's property, or it's going to adjoin the current owner's property, which means technically by zoning, it's not landlocked.
Here's the challenge I have, and I get the hardship clause, that because he wants to leave his current residence and move into this residence, if he sold his current residence and then bought this property, we wouldn't be having this discussion. Because he would not be, well,
You would still have the discussion on the 3-to-1.
Right.
You just would
Yeah.
not have the discussion about not being landlocked.
yeah.
But it would still be owned by the crafts, which means it wouldn't be landlocked.
But your comment relative to it would be 3-to-1, can you explain that one more time? You said that if,
Yeah, understood.
yeah, can you go through that one more time for me, please?
Absolutely. Can we throw our site plan back up there again?
Yeah, I apologize. I was
No, it's okay.
trying to pull up our GIS here. There we go.
And then zoom up to just north of the proposed house location. By definition, the lot width is at the setback line. It's my intention that when we plat this property, the 120-foot narrow section of the property will not have a setback in it. You cannot put a house in that area. The new setback line will be 30 feet south of the 240-foot width.
Okay.
So by definition, the ratio, assuming that we get through this today and start down the platting direction, our lot to width ratio will be 3-to-1 because we'll be 240 feet wide, 720 feet deep.
So that would mandate that the rest of the property would essentially be an easement,
It would just be, yeah, unbuildable for a residence.
yeah.
The only easement would be a small triangle at the existing driveway.
I understand, but I
Okay.
mean, it's
So in that case,
mode
then
of
it complies.
access.
I'm hesitant to say that it would comply because regardless of where you put the I mean, you could put the setback line where he's proposing, but that still doesn't mean that that's where the property line begins. Setbacks are typically measured from where the property line begins to wherever you put the setback. I think he's proposing it as a 30-foot setback, but I would want to have a discussion about that, because I don't know if it's a true 30-foot setback or if you would still measure it from the road and it would be a, you know, a 480-foot setback. I would let that be a Mike determination.
Yeah. Mike, any commentary on that?
No.
No, not right now, or no, not at all?
Not right now.
Okay.
It does, at this time, seem like a desire more than
Yeah.
a hardship, because it's not owned yet, right? And so it's, that's a extra hurdle. Knowing that there might be a change
Yeah.
in rules, is there a?
How much does a
suggestion?
1-month continuance hurt you in this
I
process?
wasn't aware you were going to change the rules. So
It's
if
up
that's
for-
going to
it is up
influence your
for dis- it
decision,
is
I'm
up
very
for-
interested in a continuance.
It's up for
Yeah,
discussion.
It is up for, it is up for, it'll be in front of the Plan Commission on the 17th.
So it would be 2 months away before the town council acted on it then?
The town
Roughly.
council, do they have to
Council probably here in the middle of next month.
they have to ratify our,
Do they have to
Changes.
ratify our rules, change the rules?
Oh, rules, this isn't a rules of procedure matter.
no, it's a ordinance, it's an
The
ordinance
zoning-
matter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the zoning ordinance
You're right.
only comes through the town council.
So they'd hear it after us in June. in
July.
Early July.
And what exactly is that change? I wasn't aware of it
It's
until
proposed
today.
to add the terminology of practical difficulty
Versus hardship,
versus hardship. Well, yeah.
essentially.
But then also that gives Mike a chance to review your logic and weigh in on it from a staff perspective, so we can have maybe a little bit more leeway in how we view this.
Right.
With that coming to light, we'd be certainly willing to sit down and have a discussion with staff, and would ask that we continue this until
Okay.
the ordinance has been changed.
All right. I would move that we continue docket number 2024-11-DSV until the July 3rd meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Henshaw. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Continued until our next meeting in
Thank you for your
July.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Easier definition.
Yeah.
All right. Next on our agenda is docket number 2024-12-DSV, RFPDI. And is the petitioner here? Great, we'll have our staff report and then get to you. Mr. Smith, staff report?
Yes, ma'am. So this is let me roll my notes here so you can actually see the PowerPoint here. This is a existing project in the Creekside Corporate Park PUD. To give you just a brief history on this project, the permits originally were issued in, I think, October, November, December of 2023. And at that time when permits were issued, everything was compliant, so there were no issues. After the permits had been issued, workers at the site ran into some drainage problems that were unknown prior to issuing the permits. Those problems, whatever the solution was to those, resulted in buildings on the approved site plan having to be shifted to accommodate for the solution to those drainage problems. And the result of that was a encroachment of 5 to 6 feet into the setback. Staff believes that this project meets the criteria required for development standard variances, and because of that, we are offering a favorable staff position. So if you have any questions,
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
happy to
Smith.
answer them.
So I have a question. How is this, identified, I guess. Because I don't have an issue with the setback, but if you noticed that while you were doing site work and you pushed the building into the setback and went ahead and built the building without asking for the variance, and now that the building is substantially built, you're coming back asking for a variance, I take some issue with the fact that this seems a little bit out of sequence.
So you're right. There's, you can place a little bit of responsibility on all parties. From a staff standpoint, I will take responsibility for the staff side of it. Long story short, without getting into our policies and what we do and don't do, we do not inspect we do not inspect setbacks. We don't measure setbacks when we go to sites.
Yeah, and I don't think it's your guys' responsibility. I think the developer should have at that
So
point raised their hand.
It wasn't caught by our inspectors at the location as the building was being constructed. It was caught once the developer submitted plans and became aware of the drainage problem. New plans were presented. We have a company, we work with BLN, who does our reviews. They notated it quite a few times, you know. In staff's defense, it was pointed out quite a few times. And the response in our comment letters that we received was, we will address it, we'll address it. And then the way it was addressed was through this request. So
After the building's in place, though.
so it's an existing condition, it's there.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, the sequencing is a little choppy, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, we believe because they had a zoning compliant site plan prior to
Yeah,
this drainage.
I don't have an issue with the setback. I have a little bit of an issue with the, I guess, lack of respect of this body to not raise your hand before you put the foundations and the steel up and say, hey, we have a problem, we're gonna shift it, can we get an approval? Versus it's largely built, and by the way, now we're gonna ask for it when we can't really do anything about it at this point.
I guess the question
we
would be, at what
can.
stage was
We
the
can deny
problem,
it.
was the problem noted? And was that early
Yeah,
on?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it had to be early on if they adjusted the location of the building in order to accommodate and to take care
Yeah.
of the drainage problem. That would have been the point at which they said, hey, you know, we need to do this. But this is in the, better to ask for forgiveness than permission, perhaps, I don't know.
it's just a little frustrating.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I feel like this body kind of went out of its way to make sure this project was successful and went through, and I don't feel like that was the right
So we have the
action to be taken.
We have the petitioner here, so perhaps we could be asking these
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah.
Petitioner, if you would give your name and.
It's okay.
You have 15 minutes if you would give your name and address, please,
Sure.
for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Joe Calderon, 11 South Meridian, Indianapolis, Indiana.
And just, I'm sorry to interrupt you, just for your information, we are in receipt of your PowerPoint slides.
Right.
So if you just hit the high points of those, that would be
He's
great.
going to pull that up for me. So certainly understand your position, Mr. Lake. It's never the easiest thing to ask for forgiveness versus permission. We actually thought we were going to be here in early April. I had had some surgery in February, and I must have missed the date by a day. So things were in motion much earlier than today, and of course, the May hearing was postponed. So here we are, kind of near the end, and that's what you're seeing and feeling, and it's uncomfortable from your perspective, thinking that we're kind of flouting that. We did reach out and start engaging with staff back in February, much earlier. Nevertheless, we do believe that there are valid reasons that support the request, and at the end, it ultimately is a very minor encroachment. So, as you are aware, this is a project that's on 2 of the lots in Creekside. It's about 9.5 acres total. Building 1 is the building in question, and that's about 105,000 square feet. Building 2, just to the east of that, is about 27,000 square feet. These buildings are all affiliated with the owner, whose principals include Graham Ray Hall and have a race team and some entertainment and other components as part of the development, which you are all aware and have been supportive of. We can see the aerial photo kind of showing how things look from a bird's eye point of view. One thing that I do want to point out in terms of why we are encroaching on that setback, which is in a PUD, by the way, is that if you look at Creek Drive as it meanders, and you can kind of see that northeast corner of the building, that's exactly the point where we encroach. And you can see how the road kind of bows up towards the building at that point. You can barely see, but there are drainage issues affiliated that kind of drove the setback off of 106th Street, and then further drainage and utility considerations that really kind of drove the ultimate shift of the building a little bit further to the north. But you can see just from a bird's eye point of view how that Creek Way kind of meanders up towards that corner of the building, and that's all the only portion of the building that encroaches on that setback. So what we call, in my world, we look at lot geometrics from a zoning standpoint. You know, we have front yard, side yard, rear yard setbacks. In this case, we have to have 3 front yard setbacks met, which are 40 feet from 106, 30 feet on the east and north off of Creek Way. So we do have enhanced front setbacks. This is a copy of the plat that indicates that. Again, we're building on both of lots 10 and 11. We are proposing what we think is a very minor encroachment into the setback line. That's 30 feet is the requirement. We're requesting that northeast corner to be 24.22 feet. So it is just a little less than 6 feet. And it's only a small triangular piece of the building. It's about 100 square feet that encroaches. So that's really less than 1%. So it's a minor encroachment. At the end of the day, it really doesn't impact view corridors or any neighbors, because everything to the north across Creek Way is open space and yet to be developed. This kind of gives you an indication of where that triangular piece is. That setback line is the line that kind of creates that triangle. I hope I did my square footage right. I think it's half the base times the height, but again, it's a very minor encroachment. We don't encroach on any utility easement. You can see the drive next to it. Again, there will be ample room for people to see, to exit and enter from that driveway. Again, just the considerations that we think should be top of mind as you make your decision tonight. We have a significant setback from 106th Street, which is really the front of the park. We range from 78 to 88 feet. Our contractor, who is here tonight, discovered the drainage issue. He made the shift. And again, we are sorry that we're here so late in June. We did suffer from a little bit of misfortune timing-wise. We should have been here really a couple, 3 months ago. And again, as I mentioned, Creek Way bows slightly to the south. That does impact that corner of the building where we're asking for the setback variance. We do have findings of fact that staff has agreed with. We are pretty certain that what we're doing does not impact the public health or safety. We're not creating any visual impairment. We're actually doing this to improve drainage. There really aren't any improvements on adjoining property, so we're not impeding visibility or access to those. And then finally, the unnecessary hardship is that this was a condition discovered during construction. The only way to otherwise fix it would have been a significant retaining wall, which would have been a pretty significant economic hardship and would have resulted in something much more disproportionate compared to the small encroachment that we're asking for. So we're grateful for staff's review of this. We don't know of any remonstrators. And again, we think that the conditions out in the field kind of justified this, despite the timing seeing you here in June. It was discovered earlier. We tried to get filed in time to be here a couple months ago. We just kind of missed it, in part due to my incapacity for a couple of weeks. So,
Thank you, Mr. Calderon. Are there any questions
Thank you.
for the petitioner? Any remonstrators who would like to speak in opposition to this petition? Thoughts or discussion among board members? Questions?
I mean, I get the hardship. I don't disagree with the hardship. Just a little frustration in the
No,
timing.
no, I would agree with
So-
you, and I think he appropriately asked for forgiveness, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right?
Yes, yes.
Understandable.
I think if it had been 3 or 4 months ago, we would have seen the hardship. So,
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
right order, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it would have been.
Yeah, totally agree.
It is.
So are we ready for a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move the docket 2024-12-DSV, development standard variance to reduce the front yard setback along Creek Way to 24 feet, 10814 and 10850 Creek Way be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and in substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Monday. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fedor. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Calderon. Mr. Smith, do you need a moment before we proceed?
Yes, one second.
Okay. All good? The next item on our agenda is docket number 2024-14-SE, David Murphy. And if we would start, please, with the staff report.
Yes, ma'am. So this is a special exception to allow the use of single-family residential in our ag zoning district. You may recall, I need to pull up my notes because I forgot the name, I believe it's the Parkers. We're here a year or two ago requesting the exact same request for the overall large parcel. Their request was approved. Since that time, they have agreed to sell off a section of that land to the petitioner for the construction of a single-family home and attached accessory uses. During our review, well, I guess I could show you the subject site and the proposed site plan. You can see the house, the barn, the garden, etc. Here's some photos that were provided to show you what could be proposed or what might be on the site. And then during our review, we focused, because it was a special exception, on the comp plan and how the comp plan recommends growth in this area. It recommends ag general, which serves as a buffer between medium and high density land uses. It does allow for limited residential development. Additionally, if you look at the aerial, there are already several established single-family homes in this area. It's a little cluster of single-family homes. After doing our review, staff believes they've met the criteria needed for a special exception, and therefore offer a favorable recommendation to the board. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Questions for Mr. Smith?
I guess I will clarify one other thing too. Sorry to interject here. I forgot to point out, historically, I believe y'all have done commitments with right to farm with single-family and ag zoning districts. I've listed that as a conditional approval. That saves the petitioner money from having to go and record it. It's listed as a condition of approval. The code says you may require, so it's not an actual shall. You don't have to require it. That's why I put it in the conditional section. If you have any questions on that, happy to answer. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Okay, we're ready for the petitioner. You have 15 minutes. If you would give your name and address, please, for the record.
Sure, thank you. I'm David, and this is Shauna Murphy. We're here. We live at 6117 Golden Eagle Drive, Zionsville, 46077. We're here to request a special exception to build a single-family dwelling on land that's currently zoned rural agricultural.
Okay, and we're in receipt of your plans for the house and the barn. Any questions for the petitioner?
Staff pointed out that, the willingness to sign a right to farm commitment. Have you done that, or are you willing, and are you aware that that's required or desired?
We acknowledge the understanding, I think, was.
And when we talked to Jonathan before, he had said, just hold off on it for right now because this is something that he wanted to discuss with you guys first before, but we're willing and we're aware.
Good. And this, Jonathan, those roads are gravel still out there, aren't they?
I believe so.
Okay.
So I would move that docket number 2024-14-SE, special exception to permit the use of a single-family residential dwelling at 550 South 800 East, be conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact, and a condition of approval requiring the right to farm commitment be recorded with the Boone County Recorder's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hinshaw. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Good luck with your
so much.
project.
I do. 515 South 700 East, go to 515.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is docket number 2024-17-SE. Alan Chan is the petitioner present. Great. We'll start with the staff report, please, Mr. Smith.
Yes, ma'am. This is a similar request. This is a special exception to allow single-family residential use in the ag zoning district. You will see on your screen the subject site, and if the special exception is approved, you will see the proposed layout of the lot. We have laid the lot out with the petitioner in a way that is compliant, so he won't have any issues as far as road frontage or 3-to-1 depth to width ratios or any of those issues. Let me get to the comp plan. Again, we looked at the comp plan to see how it directed growth in this area, and it recommends ag general, which again allows for limited residential development. And similar to the previous petition, the character of this district has already been established with single-family homes in the area. Because of these reasons, staff believes they have met the criteria needed for special exceptions and offer a favorable staff recommendation. And then again, this is a similar layout with the right to farm, so if y'all want that as a condition of approval, it's listed as well. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. Any questions for Mr. Smith? This is a pretty unusually shaped lot, so you had input in,
So we were trying to, and let me, I guess I'll go to the previous slide here. We were trying to create a lot that would be approvable and meet our development standards. And although it is shaped in a unique configuration, it meets the 3-to-1 depth-to-width ratio. We did not, and I don't have my glasses here to see the size of the home. He may, and the petitioner knows this, he may have to reduce the size of his accessories to avoid having accessory over primary. But as far as the layout of the lot, he should have no issues there.
thank you, Mr. Smith. Petitioner, if you're ready, if you'd give your name and address, please, for the record.
Our name is Alan Chan, currently living at 19015 Edwards Grove Drive in Noblesville. Requesting for special exceptions for a single-family home. Next to me is Mark Carvanis. He's the current landowner property of the 10 acres. Mr. Mark here had some health issues in 2020 and needs some help on his property to maintain upkeep, and kind of came to a mutual agreement, if possible, if we could possibly build a home so that we can help him on site. So that's kind of what we're asking for. And I know the lot layout is a little different, and the reason for that is because there's a legal drain that runs through the property, and we have to build 75 feet from that legal drain. So in order to make the property work, we had to move the building further to the back and south, and hence the road frontage in the front. That's why we need that sliver in the front to meet that 3-to-1 ratio that was discussed.
Thank you.
Let me fill that in a little bit too. I'm Mark Carvanis. I'm the current owner of the property, 430 North, 1200 East, Sheridan. My wife and I acquired this property in 2018, kind of as our retirement dream home, if you will. And things went very, very well till 2021, when I was hit with a major medical situation. And I've not recovered entirely from that, and probably never will. So in the interest of trying to stay in our dream retirement home, we've known Alan and Monica for probably going on 5 years now. Our relationship is really more family than it is friends. So it's kind of a little bit of a background. So we have not yet parceled this. We've been working with your staff, and the lines are negotiable, if you will. But this is the general layout we've come up with. As Alan said, there's going to be some engineering issues. We have some drain issues that we've got to work around and so forth. But that's kind of the background to it. It's, there's not a whole lot to it.
All right, thank you. That helps us. Thank you very much. Questions for the petitioner? Discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. You're willing to sign off on a right to farm on this property as well?
And just so my plan commission members are aware, this will have to come through plan commission as a subdivision. So you will see this unique shaped lot once they get, if they get approval of the special exception, so.
So I move that docket number 2024-17-SE, special exception to permit the use of a single-family residence at 430 North, 1200 East, be conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and a condition of approval requiring the right to farm commitment be recorded with the Boone County Recorder's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Fedor. It's a contest. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Good luck
Thank
with
you
your
for your time.
project. Okay, the next item on our agenda is docket number 2024-21-SE, special exception, Select Towers. Is the petitioner here, representative? Okay, thank you, Mr. Price. We'll start with the staff report, please.
Before I get into my staff report, I received one letter of, I'm going to call it a letter of support, and some information from the petitioner related to the tower and the radio frequencies. I told them I would pass these out to you, so that's what I'm going to do, right? We'll just take one and hand it down. That'll probably save you some time. All right, so as you mentioned, this is a special exception specific to section 194082, providing for a wireless communications facility in the rural professional business zoning district. Let me give my PowerPoint to. Here's a aerial showing you the existing surrounding land uses. In the area, there's a variety of, there's a mix, single-family, multifamily, commercial uses such as the storage units directly to the south and a fire station just up the road. Looking at the comprehensive plan again to guide us in this petition, it identifies this site for commercial development, which is intended to provide a location for high volume and higher intensity commercial uses. Looking at the intent of the zoning district, rural professional business, this zoning designation was established to act as a buffer between commercial and residential uses. Let me pull up my staff report. Jumping to the final slide, before I forget to provide this as a clarification, our rural zoning districts do not have development standards for telecommunication facilities, okay? The closest thing we have is section 194102, urban special regulations for wireless telecommunications facilities. Long story short, our urban zoning districts do have standards, our rural districts do not. So if you get to where you want to approve this, staff is recommending conditional approval, with that being the condition of approval, that the petitioner needs to adhere to the urban development standards rather than the rural development standards that do not exist, okay? That being said, happy to answer any questions you may have, but staff believes, based off of the criteria for a special exception, staff believes the petitioner has met that criteria, therefore offers the favorable recommendation. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there questions for Mr. Smith? Okay. Petitioner, Mr. Price, if you would give your name and address, please, for the record.
Yes, thank you. For the record, my name's Matt Price, with an address of 10 West Market Street, Indianapolis, Indiana, with the law firm Denton's, representing Select Towers 2. Introduce a couple of folks that are with me here this evening. We have, first of all, Brian Ramirez from Select Towers. The tower itself is being built for use by AT&T. We have Indiana President Bill Swords of AT&T, and also a Zionsville resident with us here this evening. And then also, this proposal is located on the Boys and Girls Club property, and we have the board president for the Boys and Girls Club as well, Adam Krupp, also a Zionsville resident. Give you just a little bit of an overview of the proposal and explain the need for this new facility. If we can start with the first slide. The star is the location for the proposed compound. That greater area that's outlined in the black is the Boys and Girls Club property. So this is planned to be in the southwest corner of the property. Our neighbor to the west is an assisted living facility, actually a skilled nursing facility located that came in there, I think 17, 18, kind of that vintage. We have self-storage to the south on the other side of a detention facility. To our immediate east is property owned by the town of Zionsville. It's an abandoned home property. Immediately north of that is the fire station. Our adjoiner immediately to the north and behind the Boys and Girls Club facility is Stoller Roofing. And then further north are to the east is the school, Zionsville West Middle School, and then to the northwest are the soccer fields. If you go to the next slide, please. This gives more of a close-up view of the proposed compound, which will be fully secured and closed by a fence. The telecommunications facility really has two main components. One is the monopole tower itself, which is the 150-foot tower with a 5-foot lightning rod. And to give you an idea, it's the kind of pole that is like a pencil, so it's not a lattice type structure, and it is not a guide tower, so there's no lines that secure the tower to the ground. Rather, it's just that cylindrical, more urban type design for the tower. And then the second component is the radio equipment cabinet itself, which will be also enclosed within the cabinet, or excuse me, within the compound. To give you a little bit of an idea about the nature of the use, it's a very passive land use. We have a technician that visits approximately once a month, so it doesn't really generate any traffic. No odor, no noise. What it does represent, though, is critical infrastructure that AT&T's RF engineer has determined needs to be supplied in order to meet capacity and coverage requirements at this location in the surrounding vicinity. If you go to the next slide. This is kind of another shot of the general area. One of the things that makes the a site really ideal is that it's well removed from any aesthetically sensitive properties, and there's a very robust tree line along. What you're looking at there is the southern border of the property, and that existing tree line. You can kind of see the assisted living facility off to the west. Go to the next slide. The next item is a propagation map, which shows the radio frequency or signal as it is today. So the yellow represents fair indoor coverage. The red, if you see over by Stonegate, is the marginal, and that's not at levels that the company views as optimal. And so this is the coverage need that we're seeking to address with this particular facility. If you go to the next slide, it shows very significant improvement in this area and starts to address some of the coverage issues in northwestern Zionsville and improving matters around Stonegate for AT&T customers. If you go to the next slide. We believe we meet each one of the findings of fact for special exception. It's not injurious to the public health, safety, or public convenience. In fact, we think it'll add to the public convenience by providing critical infrastructure and contributing to public health and safety as far as providing enhanced coverage for individuals to communicate with their family, conduct business, call for help. Cell phones are a very important tool in public safety. It does not adversely affect any of the adjoining property values. It's well removed from any more sensitive uses. It's screened from surrounding land uses and complements the existing use. It also provides a revenue source for this nonprofit landlord, which serves our community. And then lastly, as staff has already articulated, it's consistent completely with the comprehensive plan. I should also add that the monopole itself is designed so that it can be shared by other carriers. So once this infrastructure is in place, it's structurally capable of accommodating other carriers that would like to locate their antenna on the tower. The carriers have understandings, or the tower companies have understandings with each other as far as providing additional space for other carriers. So once this infrastructure is established then it can be utilized by more than one carrier and helps to prevent any type of a proliferation of towers, which is something we really don't have in this area. And in fact, the way Zionsville has gone about its business with regard to wireless infrastructure has been very creative in that, if you notice, many of our towers are located in and around or on municipal or other governmental or institutionally owned properties, like the Zionsville School Corporation has a couple, and that serve the community very well while also contributing to the public benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Price.
Mr. Swords, if you'd like to kind of wrap up, then we'll be available to answer questions.
Okay. Would you give your name and address, please, for the record?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. Bill Swords, 9 Stonewall Lane, Zionsville, Indiana. Madam Chair, members of the board, thanks for the opportunity to visit with you. I have the opportunity of hearing from a lot of folks who live in those red areas over the last 10 years, and this special exception will make quite a bit of difference. You may know there's not a cellular structure between basically the high school and the interstate, which is a pretty large area. And as Mr. Price mentioned, you know, whether it's consumers or business owners, students or public safety, all of us, I think, increasingly value the ability to be able to connect and communicate. This is a chronic spot. It's been that way for a long time. I live off Ford Road and frequently travel out to 65 to make my way downtown. And inevitably, you know, although fortunately we don't experience drop claws like we used to, there is a large section there that needed this investment and will be very, very beneficial and very helpful. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I would appreciate your support.
Thank you. Any questions for the petitioner?
I have one question. I'm looking at C11, which is 15 of 97 in the packet. It says it has spots for 3 future carriers right within there. You said there's not an intent for future towers. Is that just other equipment space for future carriers? I mean, I just want to make sure there's not 4 towers out there.
No. It's a very good question.
Okay.
No, so each of those carriers will have ground level radio equipment as well.
Okay.
They each accomplish that in different ways. Some have a little accessory building, some have cabinetry only, but what we've done is have enough ground space to be able to add that radio equipment if another carrier comes along.
So they would be mounting their antennas on the
Yeah, but
pole,
they're
but
not
they would
big
have
cabinets.
other accessory buildings
Right.
besides the one that is going to be part of this installation.
Correct. They'd have their own segregated space for their radios.
I
Yep.
see.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Henshaw?
Yeah, that'll just be quite a bit of equipment down there at the ground.
So-
Is the fence is a little penitentiary looking, you know? Yeah, are there any other options besides chain link and barbed wire?
8-foot chain link.
Yeah,
There won't-
it's
there-
right next to a kid's,
Yeah, we
you know,
we
space
definitely
and-
won't have any barbed wire. You want to talk about our screening?
That's what it looks like at
Yeah,
the top.
that's what's shown
That's
on
what's
the-
shown on
on
the
the drawing.
photograph. Yeah, I just like to see if
Brian
there are
Ramirez,
options.
Select Towers, 3620 Developers Road, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46227. Yes, I was actually looking at that today, and
Okay.
we can do a couple things. We can put some barbed wire, not barbed wire, I'm sorry.
Point it out at me.
Thank
I'm
you,
sorry,
that
I'm sorry.
clarifies
You're talking
things.
about barbed wire here. Slats. A lot of times what we do is we put like hunter green slats in there to hide the equipment at the base of the tower. Or we could go with a wood fence, but that fades and turns gray and causes issues. So that's what we generally do, is put slats in place.
Make it taller instead of having the
We
wire
can
at
do,
the
if
top.
you want a taller fence, we can do a taller fence.
It's an alternative to having the
Yep.
barbed wire at the
Mhm.
top.
We're fine with that.
Okay.
While we got you up there, what's the lifespan of these towers? Do they, I mean, is this something that's going to be replaced after 25 years?
Oh, no, these are built for, I mean, there's towers that have been around for 70 years at this point.
The technology will change before the tower.
Right.
Well, that was part of
This
my
is a galvanized finished tower, non-reflective. It is, so for rusting purposes and things like that, it's protected.
So I have a question regarding your engineer's information that was sent to us. It mentions here that the RF emission readings at this site or in the accessible areas would be well below the applicable limits for FCC uncontrolled, so on and so forth. Could you give us an idea of what those readings would be and what the applicable limits might be?
Technical readings, I would not be able to answer. But generally speaking, we are operating about 1% of the power that we're actually allowed to do. We're not trying to reach out and grab stuff 10 miles away. We're trying to grab stuff within a mile to a mile and a half. In an area like this that has a lot of activity going on with all the shopping areas over there, the school, and also the soccer fields and things like that, there is a lot of people in a lot of places in that area. And especially if you're having games at the school or anything like that. Not to mention, there's highway traffic as well as Whitestown Parkway along that area. There's a lot of people on the phone at the same time. So we're only trying to get basically a mile to a mile and a half out.
I understand. My question really has to do with people's concerns about the beliefs that these are harmful things that come from cell towers, and given that this is an area that is highly intensive because of the Boys and Girls Club and the schools and so on, just putting to ease people's concerns that they might have about having a cell tower there. That's the reason I was asking. This is below what would be the applicable limits. I don't know what the applicable limits are and how much below them this might be. And just out of curiosity.
Yeah, sure. So I have literature that addresses that. If you'd like to review that, I'm happy to supply it. But the way these limits came about, maybe is a good place to start, is that the FCC, back when the Telecommunications Act was promulgated in '96, came up with these limits. And they did extensive health studies and made the determination that facilities that were operating below their limits were safe. And since that time, we've located these type of facilities actually very commonly in schools, in hospitals, on ball fields like at the Zionsville football stadium, and never had any experience with any difficulties. That's not to say that the internet is filled with all kinds of things, including at one point, if you remember in 2020, there was kind of a thread on the web that cell towers were responsible for the spread of COVID and things of that nature. And so there's been a lot of studies, and what we found is that as long as you're operating below the FCC thresholds, they've not found any correlation to health effects. The federal law, in fact, even goes further and states that it's not a proper basis for making a land use decision. We don't come in with that. We'd rather demonstrate compliance.
Right. I understand.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Price. Yep. And on that topic, I'm going to ask if there are any remonstrators for this project. Do we have anybody online? No? Good. Okay. Further questions?
I have another question for Mr. Price. What's the diameter at the base of this tower? You described it as a pencil, but I'm pretty sure it's bigger than that. It is, okay.
Right, and for good reasons, yep.
So it is a tapered tower, and at the base, it's probably around this. I could wrap my arm around the base. And then by the time it gets to the top, it's probably this big around.
Okay.
Like he said, there's no guy wires, and it's definitely not like the tower you have outside the building here with the cross. It's just a pole, like a utility pole that you're seeing built all over the place now. That's what it looks like.
Thank you.
How many parking spots is this taking out from the Boys and Girls Club, and is that going to cause them any parking concerns with us from a staff standpoint, or from them as well?
I believe it's two
Just two
total
spots?
parking spaces. Yeah.
Okay.
So I would argue that they're underparked significantly anyway. 2 spots is not going to make
No,
a difference.
I agree. It looks like there's plenty of parking.
Saturday basketball and pickups in the afternoon, they're well underparked, but yeah, 2 spots is not going to.
Could I, if I may too, if we could make one clarification on the urban development standards. We are not able to comply with all of the urban development standards because those are standards that were developed for urban sites. For example, there's a height limitation on urban towers in Zionsville, which is 120 feet, which we're in a rural district and permitted as a telecommunications facility. We really need that height in order to serve the area. Otherwise, we're going to need either a variance or we're going to need more towers. And so we don't want to volunteer to a lower height than what we are permitted by ordinance. And then there's some other standards that we think are not applicable to a rural zone site. One of them is that there's a minimum, I think, separation requirement for urban sites that's approximately 1 mile. I don't know if there's another tower within 1 mile of us or not. I don't believe so, but I don't want to inadvertently agree that we can meet that standard.
My understanding, and Mr. Smith, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that we were asking them to abide by those regulations to the satisfaction of the building commissioner. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, so that's exactly correct. And Mike's here, he can speak to what he would like specifically if he would like to, but I'm open to negotiations. We just don't want a project with no standards.
Right.
Because it's challenging to review when there's nothing to review against.
Could we then say just per our site plan, because we've laid out our site plan that has applicable, it shows the exact location of where the tower is on the site plan.
Again, I think that there's a lot more in those standards than just what's referenced on your site plan. There's a lot more in the zoning ordinance than just what you're showing on your site plan.
And we can meet everything. I just want to make sure as far as setbacks and height and separation from another tower that we're clear on that. There's no precedent for applying an urban set of development standards to a rural property that I'm aware of. And I think the cleanest way of addressing this is just to say as per the site plan with regard to development standards anyway.
Yeah, I have no objection to, as part of the plan review, allowing you to conform to your site plan. And so I have no reservations about trying to, changing what's shown on your site plan. But again, there's much more in the zoning ordinance, in those standards, than just what's referenced in your site plan. So.
And what are those things,
Yeah,
Mike?
it's a long list. It's pages of standards, and I don't know those offhand, but though I have read them. Yes.
I'm saying as long as the height and the setbacks are per our plans, otherwise this is.
It seems like you have two main issues, the height and the setback. Are those your two predominant issues with it?
Yeah, I think the other standards have to do with construction standards and showing what our master plan is for providing facilities. We have no problem with that whatsoever.
I think we have an understanding.
Yeah.
Since I'm speaking, I have a few other questions. At what point is the FAA contacted and engaged in this process for approving or being notified of the location?
They've been contacted, and we provided an FAA letter as part of the submittal.
Oh, okay. And then would the site be leased by Select Towers? Will they be the
Correct. They're the tenant.
leaser? Okay. And would the pole be owned by Select Towers as well?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Oh, and also on the slats, my experience with, and maybe the materials have changed, but I've often seen slats on fences where they deteriorate over time, and they crumble, and then they become a maintenance problem. So that's something to be aware of. Slats look great when they're new, and they're fine if they're maintained. Often they discolor, and then you see people repair slatted fences, and that's discolor. Some are matching colors and others aren't. So slatted fences can become as much an eyesore as not having slats at all. Also, I have seen cell tower sites and perimeter fences that have landscaping as a way of buffering the appearance of the fence. And that might be a better long-term solution, landscaping rather than slatting.
Will this go before Plan Commission for development plan approval, or no?
I think so.
Huh?
I think yes, but.
I believe so. So. And it, depending on the standards that y'all, depending on the conditions that y'all force them to adhere to, if they're going to be required to build certain things that are required in urban versus rural, or if they're not, we would have to look at that and the conditions you attach to what's being required.
Could I have Mr. Krupp speak to the design of the site? Because we didn't come up with this alone. We worked with the Boys and Girls Club on it.
Okay.
Good evening.
Thank you. I'm Adam Krupp, Zionsville resident at 340 Rockwell Court. Also board chair of the Boys and Girls Club of Boone County, located 1575 Mulberry. So I'm representing the board in my capacity tonight. We fully support this as an organization, obviously not just because of the potential revenue that it would provide our nonprofit, which supports the children of our community, but also we looked extensively at this as a board. We discussed it, we debated it, and ultimately the board, consisting of about 20 members of this community, speaking of Boone County at large, but the majority of our board is in the area in which this tower will be at our Whitestown unit. We approved this to move forward. We worked with the developer and the company to make sure that safety issues were addressed. One of my personal concerns as a member of the board, which was addressed right away, was that the fencing and the secure mechanism around the pole on the site was such that there would be no risk whatsoever to children or families or anybody coming to use our facility. That was quickly addressed. In terms of just sort of the specifics of how it looks, obviously we would not want any barbed wire, any sort of chain link fencing that would not be visually pleasing to our members and our families that are coming to use our facilities. So we have had ongoing conversations about what our preferences are and are happy to engage additionally to make sure that they sort of meet standards I think that the community would expect to see as well. With respect to the question regarding parking, we are underparked. There is more room on the property. I would say the space specifically that's at issue here is where we tend to back up our buses. And so really just the back of those buses cover up that corner. We'll find another location for those. So this doesn't impact us at all in terms of our ability to serve when we have hundreds of people coming to play basketball, as many of you have seen, or when we host the ever popular 7th and 8th grade dances for the community and hundreds of parents are lined up before and after and looking for parking. So we just had a big event last weekend with parking full, but also one thing we have done lately is we have provided shuttle service at the middle school nearby where we've had people, we've worked together with them so we can park and bring people over. Right. We have no concerns with the specific area or the pole in terms of taking up any of our space for parking.
Okay. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you.
Further questions or discussion?
I think to Mr. Dale's comment about the fence, I'm wondering if there's another material that might be better for that fence. Some sort of aluminum system with a cedar plank infill or an aluminum system in general. I agree that a lot of times those will crack and then they start sliding down the chain link, and if they're not maintained, it can not look good over time.
I guess plasticized chain link fence is not an option.
Could be final coated.
Yeah, it
Black,
could be.
yeah, something like that. At least looks a little less industrial, perhaps. But
So, yes, a couple ways we've done it in the past is with a solid fence, and that's a wood fence. And personally, when I look at them, they fade within a year, and that creates a bigger issue. With slats, what do we like about the slats is we're able to replace them easily. You can go in and just slide new ones in if we need to. So I've never had any real issues with the slats fading that much at all. So, of course, I think it would probably take 10 or more years to do that. With that being said, we could easily replace slats with no issue at all, Regarding landscaping, there, as far as the north and east sides, that's parking lot area, so we wouldn't really be able to put any landscaping there. Straight to the south is what he was shown before, those large trees, and we're right up against that. There's a drainage ditch that goes through there. And then to the west, there's a tree line to the west already in place. Good. That we're close to.
Okay. Thank you.
So if we needed some additional trees to the west, because I do think there are a little bit of an open spot there, we'd be willing to do that.
Good. So I don't know whether we got to closure on whether this would be a conditional, if we approved it, whether it would be conditional based on the urban special regulations and.
So I just read through those.
Yes.
Height, obviously, you wouldn't comply with. We understand that. distance to another cell tower, you aren't clear whether or not you're in that or not. The majority of those other standards, you know, you have to have a monopole, which you're doing. You can't have towers on top of houses. We're not doing that. The other requirements in there generally do not apply anyway. So I don't feel like personally that needs to stay in there. However, you could make it conditional on them adding infill slats to the 8-foot tall chain link fence if you wanted. So
I'm happy if they work with the Boys and Girls Club and
Right.
get a solution that's satisfactory for the safety and visually fits with the
Right.
area and the context. And I mean,
yeah,
it
we can-
sounds
we
like
can
they're
keep
willing
it-
to work with each
we can
other.
keep it more open than, you know,
Yeah.
But I think to Mr. Smith's point of not having any kind of metrics is,
the challenge is those requirements don't affect the way this is constructed
Right.
anyway. There's nothing
Well-
that talks about the size of the fence, the height of the
I
fence, like
understand.
none of that's in there. It's just, it's other things that don't apply to this type of pole.
or the setting, the rural
This
setting.
setting,
right,
yeah.
and not
Well,
versus
I
the
mean,
urban setting.
Even in an urban setting, it doesn't apply to a monopole location. Just like it talks about guy wires, well, we don't have guy wires. It talks about guy anchors, we don't have guy anchors. Talks about equipment buildings, talks about they need to be operated in compliance with the FCC. So these are all things that really just, I mean, they're doing this, their letters state that they're doing this, so these are extraneous and really don't apply anyway, as I'm reading it.
Beyond the site plan, I mean, I think as
Yeah.
long as we said site plan and those standards were,
Yeah,
those
I
two,
mean-
how those marry up, we're fine with that.
Your submission covers anything that would even be remotely applicable
Right.
to a cell tower. I mean, like, they're not showing big, tall lights around it, you know, which is, you know, one of the things it talks about, so.
Mr. Dale, are you comfortable with
Well, for
that?
example, you mentioned lighting, those standards regulate lighting. They're just not showing lighting right now. But there's no harm in having those standards in place in case they do want to have lighting. I think there might have been reference to signage too, though my memory's not 100% on that. There's various things in there referenced that are not a part of the proposal that we would apply.
I just think, how do you parse that out at this point? How do you say, yes, we'll approve it, but it has to meet this, but it has to meet it except for this clause and this clause and.
And that's why it would be
Yeah.
subject to my discretion.
To the satisfaction of the building commissioner is
Okay.
the way that.
As long as that's informed by the site plan. I think those other things are generally applicable rules, like it's not going to be lit, we'll comply with FCC signage, things of that nature, that's understood. And we can work with Mr. Dale on that.
Okay. Are we ready for
Sure.
ready for a motion?
I move that docket number 2024-21-SE, special exception to permit the use of a wireless communications facility at 5964 South 700 East, be conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings and staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, subject to requirements of the Town Code, Section 194.102, Urban Special Regulations for Wireless Telecommunications Facilities, to the satisfaction of the building commissioner, and that the chain link fence be 8 foot tall with limited visibility in a manner that is acceptable to the Boys and Girls Club.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Monday. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is docket number 2024-15-SE, Roy Myers. Is the petitioner here this evening?
And I assume, is staff going to do that as a dual petition?
Yeah, they're back to back.
Okay, that's also 2024-16-DSV. So, ready for the staff report, Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am. Starting with the special exception, seems like this has been a familiar request repeated today. Single-family residential use in the ag zoning district. If you take a look at the GIS map that I've pulled up on the screen, you'll see the outline of the subject parcel. Let me pull up my comp plan. Before I skip over the slides, the petitioner provided a colored photo of what they intend. They call it a barn dominium. So if the special exception is approved, that is close to what he is proposing or would like to propose for the property. Again, here's the subject site. For the special exception, I'm going to skip to the comp plan. It identifies medium residential development in the area. A section of that has a statement, housing proposed for this area would be smaller lots, potential clustered housing, which is what this is, and zero lot line housing or condominiums. Skipping through all of our staff report, staff believes the petitioner met the requirements needed for the special exception and therefore offers a favorable recommendation for the special exception. Moving to the development standard variances, there are two currently on your agenda. One, if I can pull my map back up, to address the 3-to-1 lot depth to width ratio. The second one was for accessory square footage to exceed primary square footage. The second development standard variance, and I don't want to take the wind out of your sails, but the petitioner will be withdrawing that request. So for tonight's discussion, we're only going to be focusing on the special exception for single family in ag zoning, which staff supports. The second part of the discussion will be a development standard variance to address the 3-to-1 lot depth to width ratio. Staff believes, among several items, but mainly because of the existing nature of this lot, it's pre-existing, staff believes this meets the criteria for the development standard variance and therefore supports that request. Happy to answer any questions you have. If you don't have any questions, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions for Mr. Smith? Okay. Representing the petitioner, Mr. Andreoli, you have 15 minutes. If you give your name and address for the record, please.
Or less, that's a maximum, Mr.
That's
Andreoli.
right. That's a max.
Thank you,
Not to-
Madam
not to
Chairman.
pass.
For the record, Mike Andreoli, 1393 West Oak Street, and we would respectfully withdraw our request for the standards variance, development standards variance for the accessory structure exceeding the main structure. We worked with staff, given the fact that staff had an unfavorable recommendation to that initially, worked with staff, and by elimination of some of the accessory structure, this is a barn dominium. So what we've done is lessen the barn part of the barn dominium so that we do not need to have a variance for the accessory structure based upon the square footages of the house itself versus the barn part of the barn dominium project. So we were thankful that we were able to work through that with Mr. And Mrs. Myers, who are here tonight, and work through that with their builders so that we could withdraw that particular request. As to the 3-to-1 lot ratio, it's kind of an interesting divergent from some of the 3-to-1 lot concerns that you've been dealing with. One of the things that we did with regard to this particular lot is determine how long it's been in existence. This was a legal lot of record and a conforming lot of record back when we believed that this was first divided and platted out into this configuration. We actually did some research and went back through the deeds. The last deed we were able to find is in 1994, when that exact legal description and those boundaries of that particular lot were established. We believe, based upon the plat map, which isn't always accurate, but kind of gives me some indication, back into the 70s and the 80s, that this actual lot was established back at that particular point in time. Actually established, and since I've been around a long time, I have all of the old ordinances from the county. And we were able to determine that this lot was probably in existence at the time when we neither had a special exception required for it for a single-family home or a 3-to-1 lot ratio, as that was implemented much later in the county zoning ordinances that were brought into the town's ordinances through the reorganization. So this is a little different situation than having essentially trying to create a non-conforming lot of record, or trying to split a lot now knowing that you're going to be out of conformance and you need a variance. This lot was in conformance for all these years and became out of conformance when the ordinance changed and required a 3-to-1 lot ratio. So that's the simple part of it as to why this creates a hardship, and why I think hopefully we've engendered a favorable staff recommendation, having provided all of that information. And I know Jonathan did some research on his own as well as it relates to this. I wanted to make that clear as to, we think that's a distinguishing factor from somebody now coming in and wanting to split a lot and saying now it's a hardship for some other reason that had nothing to do with the lot itself. And so I wanted to make that distinction for you, and hopefully it's a distinction that carries some weight and makes a difference based upon the fact that when this lot was actually denominated in that configuration with that 3-to-1 lot ratio that is now out of conformance. So we would respectfully request that the board approve this. As far as the special exception is concerned, soil borings have been done, all of those things. So the lot will be a lot that will comply with the minimum 2-acre standards. It's a 5-acre lot. So we've actually submitted a detailed site plan by Jerry Kittle from Innovative Engineering that showed the prior dimensions actually fitting on the lot. So we're not going to need any setback variances or any type of variances in that regard. We'll be able to comply with your standards and your development standards as it relates to everything except the 3-to-1 lot ratio. Happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Andreoli. Are there any questions for Mr. Andreoli regarding these two petitions? Are there any remonstrators here? Anyone who would like to speak about either of these petitions? Do we have anyone online? No? Discussion?
Chair? We do have.
Oh, you want to come to the podium, please, and give your name and address, please?
Celeste Mers, 6050 South State Road, 267 Lebanon, Indiana. We just have a question. Welcome to the neighborhood. That lot, we're just worried about drainage issue. That lot floods really bad, and so I didn't know if there's any kind of drainage solutions, or if you guys even know how badly it floods. Like, I have videos that can show like a river running from the back corner of that property through our property, because the drainage tile there. So we just didn't know with the new building, with the size of it, how it's gonna affect everybody else who's basically downstream of you. Or your guys' house, like going through there. That was just what we were worried about.
Well, are there any other issues that you'd like to raise while you're...
No, we're just worried about the water.
Right.
Welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you. Mr. Andreoli or Mr.?
Well, I don't know if Roy has been able to have...
A little bit that I've done research on it.
If you would give your name and address, please. And
Yeah, Roy Myers, address is 7358 Harbortown Drive, Whitestown, Indiana. The little bit of research that I've done is working with some guys out at Crawfordsville with the Indiana State Department on that frontage to get the approach to come into the property. I will have to put a culvert and all that in that area to take care of that water on the frontage. I was not so much aware on the 6 acres back in the back if that's holding water or not. We were concentrating on where the soil bore tests were all done, where the house could be built, you know. But again, we only looked at it a month and a half, 2 months ago. So I really, you know, without bad rain and all that, I could not answer that question right now.
I would tell you that having raised that particular issue, we've not closed on this particular lot yet. So I think that is something that we're going to want to take a look at. I don't know if it's going to affect our request here tonight, but we do thank the neighbors for letting us know that, because we want to make sure that we've got a lot that in all particulars doesn't cause us any problem or our neighbors. So we will take a look at that.
Well, and with the other standards that are in place, they're not allowed to, over the course of their construction,
Right.
do anything that would divert any water onto a neighbor's property. So there may be an existing condition further back on the site. They wouldn't necessarily be required to fix that unless it impeded their development, but their project could not further impede anything on your property, so.
And what they're being granted, if this is approved, they're granted the right to have a single-family residence on that piece of property, and that it would be a lot that meets.
The other thing that I think is
would get the
important.
variance. Just a minute, Mr. Andreoli. The precise plans for what that house would look like and so on would be subsequent to this particular, these petitions that we're talking about right now. So, right? Other thoughts about this?
Madam Chairman, the other thing that I think is important is we're going to have a perimeter drain for the septic system, which means we're going to have that engineered as well for the actual septic. Then we're going to require a perimeter drain, and we're going to have to find an outlet and those types of things. We think we'll be able to have that, but in that course of that investigation, we're going to be in a position to determine if there's any water that we need to pick up or accommodate, but we can't put it on you or can't put it on an adjacent neighbor.
Further questions, discussion?
Make a motion. For the petition 2024-15-SE, special exception to permit the use of a single-family residence at 5970 South State Road 267, be conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and a condition of approval requiring the right to farm commitment be recorded with the Boone County Recorder's Office.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Henshaw. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's approved.
And given that the lot is an existing condition, I move that docket number 2024-16-DSV, development standards variance to exceed the 3-to-1 depth to width ratio for property at 5970 South State Road 267, be approved as presented and described based on the findings of staff report and staff recommendations, submitted finding of fact and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mundy. Discussion? All in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good.
Thank you.
All right, the next item on our agenda is docket number 2024-18-DSV. Simon and Catherine Katz are the petitioners present. Good. Mr. Burris. Ready for the staff report, Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am. As you mentioned, this is a development standard variance, specifically to section 194095, to allow for the existing accessory structure to remain prior to the construction of the primary residence. If you look at your screen, you'll see the proposed plat. I'm sure the petitioner will get into this, but this recently went through a rezoning process. And after the petitioner goes through the various approvals needed, the intent, as you can see on this top left corner, is to build a new single-family home on the lot. The problem is the existing garage. The line you will see going through the middle of your screen there is the dividing line between the two parcels. Currently, the existing garage is on the same parcel as the existing home, meaning it's a compliant accessory structure. Because of where they are locating the proposed line, they are proposing to split that lot, or to split the parcel, and the resulting split leaves the accessory building on a lot without a primary structure. Because of the location of the lot line, the proposed dividing line, staff believes this was a self-created problem and therefore did not meet the criteria necessary for a development standard variance. Because of this, staff offered the unfavorable recommendation. However, a procedural note, and I believe the petitioner has seen this, and this is one of the items that he's already seen. If you can get to conditional approval, staff recommends the condition that you see on your screen. Within 3 years of the date of approval, owner shall demolish and or remove the existing garage or barn unless construction of a new single-family home is commenced on parcel 1. So essentially this gives a sunset clause, if you will, on the approval of this, and would require the petitioner to remove the structure if a single-family home is not built on the property. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Great.
Turn back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any questions for Mr. Smith?
So a house, if a house isn't there in 3 years, the garage is coming down. So it then becomes a lot that can be.
That's what I have provided for you as conditional approval.
Okay.
You can approve this without conditions. You can do a conditional approval, which is what I recommended, and any other conditions you would like to add.
Yeah.
You can deny it outright, or you can continue the request till next month.
Yeah, I think it's a chicken or egg scenario, and that, like, they're not, the intent is not to leave the garage there permanently, but they have to replat the property to be able to build the house, and therefore
yeah.
the garage, so.
Catch-22.
Yeah, so I mean, you're basically, if you conditionally approve it, you're approving the finalized condition, knowing that this is a temporary issue.
With a carrot for them to move forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any further questions for Mr. Smith? Mr. Burris, if you would give your name and address for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Roger Burris. My office is at 410 West Oak Street in Zionsville. And with me here tonight are Simon and Catherine Katz, the property owners. They already own the property. They've also been through the process of rezoning it. So some of you have seen this before. First of all, Mr. Lake mentioned replatting, which is not required here because when they bought it, it was already in 2 parcels. The back parcel, which we call parcel 1, was a 1-acre parcel, and that was created because the previous owner actually sold the property and back to Manchester Square Development, and they retained this 1-acre parcel as kind of a buffer. You know, I don't know whether they ever had any intention of building on it or anything, but then they ended up selling it to my clients. They're downsizing, they're retiring. My clients would like to build a very nice house on parcel number 1, and so we've already been through the process of having it rezoned, which one could say that was somewhat of a unreasonable hardship on my clients, because you know that was kind of an unusual situation, that area that was annexed and came in with open land zoning classification, when that really wasn't consistent with the neighborhood. And if you go back to when we started, I mean, the other thing that kind of creates this situation is that the 1 acre parcel, while that would be big enough, you know, I mean, we could fit the house probably, and my clients are not, they're planning to continue owning both parcels. So we're not planning to split it or to split ownership, but we would like to, you know, a lot of what we've done, a lot of what we've talked to staff about is doing things that make sense for this property into the future. So in the future, you know, when somebody does decide to sell, then there's not going to be problems like one of the things that we worked with staff on is the access easement, which has been in existence since 1977. We didn't create that, but having that count as access for another property, you know, does require a permanent, well, it's already a permanent easement, but we're going to make sure that that would apply to parcel number 1 as well as parcel number 2. So if it ever is under separate ownership, that's already going to be covered. So we got over that issue with staff. And so the only remaining issue based on what we'd ideally like to do and what we'd like to do is taking total acreage of 3.38 acres and allocate it to parcel 1 rather than 1 acre would be 1.6 acre. And then that would leave the existing home on 1.78 acres more or less. So 2 nice sized lots, certainly, you know, big enough to accommodate what's being proposed without any side yard issues or setback issues or lot coverage issues. The rezoning kind of solved that because the lot coverage is 20%. We've got plenty of land. And so when you consider that this is kind of a temporary situation where until the house is built, an accessory structure is not, at least under the current ordinance, is not allowed prior to the primary residence being the home. But I've certainly seen this come up before where a commitment was made to rectify that and to put a deadline on it. We offered to make that commitment, and staff's response was, well, you know, if it's conditionally approved, then you wouldn't need to because it's going to be a condition of the approval. We are absolutely fine with that. We're also fine with the requirements that staff suggested on the access easement. So we've really solved everything except that. And so that brings us down to whether there's an unnecessary hardship. And by the way, you know, Mr. Andreoli was talking about the 3-to-1. I presented that at the April meeting, and I explained to you when that happened, when Jerry March did that, if you'll remember.
I thought
Anyway.
it sounded familiar.
Yeah, okay, but then the other guy who was here that you continued, he quoted the case I quoted at that hearing. So I guess I should be flattered that he did that, but something's going on here that I'm not sure what it is. Anyway, but, you know, hardship, it's unnecessary hardship. So it's not just that there's a hardship. I respectfully disagree with when staff says that it's a self-created problem. I mean, my client didn't structure these lots, these parcels the way they are. My client just bought them and wants to do something that would be very good for the neighborhood. And I don't think there's been anybody who has said anything against it. Actually, we got a letter of support today. Mr. Smith, did you get that?
It might be in my email.
Okay.
I'll
Yeah,
have to
they
look.
copied me on it, so I think it is in your email, and it's the owner of the property next door to the south, who said they fully support the petition. But you know, the cases say that you need to consider everything in, you know, these are case-by-case situations, and actually, if you want me to go through my findings, if you want me to comment more on the definition of unnecessary hardship, I'm happy to do that, but I'm also happy to help you get out of here earlier than if I did that.
That's
So
sounding really good.
if you tell me you've heard enough.
I do have a question to something
Sure.
you just said. You said that your client bought the parcels in the configuration that they are today, correct? Is that
Correct.
correct?
The 1 acre and the 2.23 acres.
And you're shifting the line between those parcels though, correct?
We're proposing,
Okay.
because
Okay. I was just trying to clarify that. Okay.
Are there questions for Mr. Burris or the petitioners regarding this?
You said that the current owners intend to build another house, but will be the owner of both houses? Is that
Correct.
correct? And is the intent to build that second house, one that's in the very near future?
yes, they're ready to start. They have a builder lined up, and they're ready to finalize a plot plan, which is where staff would make sure that everything else is right. So yes, we're ready to go.
And their intention with the existing garage that's there, is it to leave it there
Yes.
and use it?
It's been there
Is
for a while, yes. And that was, it's kind of a garage, kind of a mini barn, not a mini barn, but a barn, pole barn structure that I think the previous owner used maybe as a studio for his business, but we're not going to use it that way. I'm not sure what it'd be, but it would be it's described as a garage, existing garage from what I understand.
So does one of them then become a rental unit? Is that?
Or it could be a rental house. There may be a family member who decides to use that house.
Additional questions, thoughts?
Any public remonstrance?
I think, are there any demonstrators?
I mean, you may have people,
Anybody
you may have
online?
people online.
Anyone? No?
Just want to make sure we check.
It's a little bit of a catch-22, isn't it? The building, you can't build because the garage is there, which then means that you have to tear the garage down, which you might want to be using. So I understand putting a condition on it that there's a timeline, that activity needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's a phasing issue, not
Yeah.
a final product,
Right.
issue.
Yeah, I think if the final product was we're just going to keep a barn there forever, then
Right.
I don't think they can, I think the hardship, you kind of need to look at it in its final state, and by putting the condition on it, the final state is that there's a house and a garage or barn or whatever,
outbuilding.
in fairly short order. And so therefore, at the end of the day, it does comply. Just
Yeah,
needs a little help getting there.
That's how I feel, is that there is another way to do this, but it winds up being the same thing ultimately.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, you can move the parcel line, build the house, move the parcel line back. It's just like,
Extra paperwork.
Yeah.
You're still getting there, yeah.
I think he's got to get back up in front of us again, so.
We thought of that, but
Yeah.
we've been doing this by the book from the
Yeah,
get-go,
that's-
so we're going to see it through.
Well, and the other option is to tear down the barn, which
Yeah.
is,
Not sustainable.
well,
Waste,
if it's a useful building, then that doesn't make sense. So are we ready to make a motion, further discussion?
I think
further
I'm on a
questions?
motion roll, so I'll just keep going
Yeah,
unless anybody
go
has
for it.
any
It's all you
objection.
today.
So I move the docket number 2024-18-DSV Development Standards Variance to provide for an existing accessory structure on a lot prior to the erection of the primary structure for the property at 900 Starkey Road be conditionally approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report, submitted finding of fact, substantial compliance with the submitted site plan, a condition that within 3 years of the date of approval of the design standards variance, owners shall demolish and/or remove the existing garage, barn, existing accessory building of approximately 1,224 square feet, presently located on parcel 2, but which may end up located on parcel 1 unless construction of a new single-family home is commenced on parcel 1 within said 3 years and is completed within a 2-year time frame.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. We have a second?
second.
Thank you, Mr. Monday. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good.
you.
Thank you. Good luck with your project. Okay, we are winding down here.
Last one.
All right, and the last item on the docket is docket number 2024-20-DSV, Stuart Klipsch, and its petitioner here, Mr. Price. Start with the staff report, please. Mr. Smith?
Yes, ma'am. So this is a development standard variance for section 194097 to exceed both the accessory square footage and the accessory height requirements in the RE zoning district. If I can get back to my PowerPoint. The first couple of slides you'll see are photos provided by the petitioner to show some elements of what are being proposed on the site. You'll see a couple of photos. Here's the overall site plan. To skip to the issues at hand, you're going to need two development standard variances, one for accessory square footage and one for the height. To the right of your screen, you'll see the math for the accessory square footage. Total accessory square footage will be 15,724. The primary residence will be 5,900. The max height of the primary structure will be anywhere from 25 to 29 feet. The indoor arena will be a max height of 31. The max height for the barn will be 26. The proposed property is, or the property is zoned RE. Section 194081 of the zoning ordinance established this district to maintain and conserve the rural country-like atmosphere, and then the section that we focused in on to encourage equestrian uses rather than residential uses. Residential development may occur, but is secondary to the equestrian purpose of this district. Using that statement and knowing what the zoning is intended for, staff believes the petitioner met the criteria for both requests for the accessory square footage and for the accessory height. Happy to answer any questions you have, but with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there questions for Mr. Smith? No. Okay, petitioner, Mr. Price, you're back.
Yes, one more time.
Give your name and address for the record, please.
I'd be delighted to. Matt Price here on behalf of Stuart Klipsch and Suzanne Baker here with me as well this evening. I think staff did a very excellent job of presenting the matter and kind of the nature of the request, being in the rural equestrian district and really seeking to have an equestrian use with improvements that allow that use to be fully realized. If you go to our first slide, and I'll give you kind of an overview of the property, but this is at the northwest corner of Hunt Club Road and Cooper Road, and it's a little over 6 acres. Mr. Klipsch would like to add a number of improvements to this property, including a home of approximately 6,500 square feet. That's a little more than what's in your staff report because we're also including a small area for a finished basement in that square footage. A private riding stable, which is shown on the site plan, an indoor riding arena, and then a small workshop and equipment storage building. Those would be the various improvements. Because an accessory use would otherwise need to be subordinate to the single-family use, which only comprises 6,500 square feet, we need a variance from that accessory limitation, but it's for the structures that are that permit essentially the full enjoyment of the property for its equestrian purposes, and we think very consistent with other properties in the vicinity that have similar types of improvements. Also, with regard to the riding arena, the height of that structure does exceed the height of the home, so That structure is anticipated to be 31 feet. The home is at 26 feet, and so because that's not strictly subordinate or less than the height of the home, we require a height variance or a variance with regard to the height of our riding riding arena as well. I would add that all of the buildings, though, are compliant with the overall height limitation for the rural equestrian district. We have read the treatment by staff of the findings of fact and the reasoning behind the conclusion that we meet those, and we do agree with regard to that reasoning very much. Mr. Klipsch, I believe, is available by Zoom to participate in the hearing as well. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Are there any questions for Mr. Price? Do we have any remonstrators here? You would like to, please, come to the podium.
Please.
In support of the petition. If you would give your name and address, please.
Can you bring the slide up of the overview from the air?
Uh-huh.
That's it, that's it right there.
Because that, how,
Wait,
oh, sorry.
Greg and Julia Schultz, 8440 Hunt Club Road, Zionsville.
That house right there is us.
Oh, be careful.
We call him Grace.
That's us. This is our neighbors, they couldn't make it right now.
Yeah, so we fully support this. I can't see why any of you would not support this, but just in case, we wanted to come up and let you know we are completely in support of this. They've done an excellent job of layout. The trees that they proposed are going to beautify it for all of us. The height, I don't see why that would be an issue either. We had a property in where we lived before. His shop was built like a barn, and it was taller than the house, and it was right next to the house, and it looked fine. We're looking forward to that being there. It fits in perfectly with the area.
Their arena is going here, and Harry's tree line here is like 40-year-old pine trees, so it will just blend right in with it, and it won't be anything obtrusive to the whole environment area. It'll just kind of blend right against that right there, so it's not like it's a big massive building sitting there. It's got the tree line right behind it that will even be taller than what that arena will be, so.
No, they're doing an excellent job of mitigating any visual, impairment that anybody would have. In fact, I'm looking forward to not actually seeing that corner of cars and streets, so we are fully in support. We hope you'll support it.
Thank you.
And they've also gone ahead, the people that want to buy the property have seeded that field out there so it didn't turn to weeds and stuff, and they did that at their own expense, whether it goes through or not. But it's seeded, it's growing grass out there and whatever happened, but it's not weeds and a mess out there. So they've already taken care of it at their own expense ahead of time.
Thank you.
Proving they'll be great neighbors.
And thank you for hanging in there with us all evening, waiting to have your say. Thank you very much. Did you mention that Mr. Klipsch might be on, is he wanting to speak, or is he just?
I don't think he had
Okay.
anything, but
All
he
right.
was available for questions and wanted to be available for the hearing.
Okay. Any questions or comments or?
Agree with staff.
Yeah, I mean, I like seeing it
Yeah.
used for equestrian, and so, yeah.
Are there other equestrian uses that you know of in the area? Just curious.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Do you want me to tell you? 'Cause
Yes.
I happen.
Yeah, all along Hunt
Yeah,
Club.
Hunt Club Road is, and just slightly west of there on the south side of the road is a Patty Kent's stable with horses. And down the road to the west is the Baber family that has a very large parcel with a number of, they breed a special type of horse. So, yeah, there are lots of horses in
So
that
this
area.
is in keeping with the.
Yeah.
Completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
The only concern I have is a 60 by 184 riding arena is a significantly large building. I understand the trees are there, trees eventually die down and so forth. It is a significantly large building.
Yeah.
60 by 184 becomes a very, very big barn very quickly.
It's not very big
I'm
for an
okay
indoor
with
arena.
it, but I'm just.
Really, it's not
Takes
a
a
big
lot
indoor
of
arena,
trees
though.
to hide a barn that size.
Down the street from us, there's some that are even bigger
Yeah, that's a,
I'm well
that's
aware.
pretty small by indoor arena standards, though. So,
Do you-
Big footprint.
I know that you're not a horse expert. This is a 3-stall, 4-stall barn, do you know?
I don't know the answer to that. We could ask Mr.
Do you know how many horses they own?
I believe it's 2.
2.
Yeah, 3 stalls.
3 stalls.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they've got a hand drawn, you got to zoom in on it pretty
Yeah.
close, but
yeah, well, it could be 4. Do you know if these are Morton buildings, or do you know?
I don't. And we really are presenting, we're really presenting those as kind of character exhibits.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
no palm trees then?
Right, yeah, no palm trees. Yeah.
So also, this schematic drawing is essentially not the finalized site plan, is that right?
That's right. I mean, it's an educated attempt to show the orientation of each of the buildings. We have, for example, you'll see that there's a large utility easement that goes through the center of the property. We've worked closely with that utility to understand where we can place improvements. So it's educated, but it's not a final engineered drawing, certainly.
Any further, anybody ready to make a motion?
Sure.
Give Mr. Lake a break.
Oh, go for it. Hey. All right.
Save your voice. I move the docket 2024-20-DSV Development Standard Variance to exceed the accessory square footage requirement for property at 8480 Hunt Club Road be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mundy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's passed.
I move that docket 2024-20-DSV Development Standard Variance to exceed the accessory height requirements for a property at 8480 Hunt Club Road be approved as presented and described based on the findings in the staff report and staff recommendations, submitted findings of fact, and substantial compliance with the submitted site plans.
Thank you, Mr. Mundy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Lake. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Thank you. Good. Well, that takes care of the petitions for the evening, but we do have a couple of matters of business
Very nice.
to be considered before we
All that
adjourn.
stuff to support a project. That doesn't happen.
All right,
Yep,
shall we start?
Yep.
How many of you got the email I sent yesterday regarding accessory garages and primary versus accessory uses? No one?
I did not.
Huh.
I don't feel so bad.
No.
He
You
sent
did.
it to the Zionsville,
No.
your Zionsville account.
Oh,
I
yeah, I did
can't-
not check that.
I can't get in my Zionsville account.
I didn't even know I had a Zionsville account.
Yeah.
That explains
This
it.
is
I feel a lot better about myself.
I'm passing down the email that I sent you all yesterday.
Didn't know I had one.
I don't expect you all to read it at the moment, so I will paraphrase for you. As you know, we have traditionally categorized garages, whether attached or detached, as accessory buildings. In looking at the zoning ordinance more carefully and the definition for garage, we found that an attached garage is different than a detached garage in terms of how it's referenced in the zoning ordinance. A garage can be, in other words, a garage can be defined as being attached or an accessory building. It's either an accessory or attached, in which case we can change our method of calculating primary area versus accessory area by including attached garages as part of the primary area. That would give the landowner a little bit of relief.
Yes, please.
When they want to add accessory buildings, because they'll be given credit, in other words,
Yeah.
for the attached garage. So I wanted to just run this by you, make sure you had no impulse against us going this direction. We don't believe this would trigger the need for an ordinance amendment. We just feel that's a reasonable interpretation of our zoning ordinance in particular how we define garage, we can very reasonably consider attached garages as part of the primary structure.
And accessory and primary structures are both counted for lot coverage
Correct.
equally? Okay, so we don't
We're not messing with that at all.
trigger, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the inspectors said, well, what if somebody wanted to build a 500 square foot house and have 8 attached garages? I was like, well, there could be one person who has 8 cars,
Yeah,
right? And so it would still be part of the primary structure.
Yeah.
So we could, theoretically, you could get some weird looking development, a small, relatively small house with a large attached
you mean
garage.
barndominium?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what barndominiums really are.
As an architect.
I don't know if anybody's got cattle in their house.
But we think that's not very common or very likely, but it's possible.
Okay.
The question really comes down to how do we determine what constitutes attached? And we're leaning towards a policy that would say that a garage must be attached to the dwelling by means of an area that meets the building code requirements for living area without increasing the number of dwelling units on the lot. In other words, the side of the garage must be attached to what constitutes conditions living area in terms of the building code.
Not a breezeway or something.
Right, it could be an enclosed breezeway as long as it meets the building code requirements for living area.
Okay, as long as it's
condition.
enclosed.
Yeah.
It's reasonable.
Yeah.
That would help a lot of these people who are constrained
Yeah, I
by
think so.
Okay.
pretty average proportion houses.
We'll probably this is a draft of the policy that we'll probably pursue. Maybe it's tweaking here and there in terms of nailing down how we define attached.
Yeah.
But this is the general direction we're going in.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you. Also, our IT director, Joe Rust, had a heart attack when he saw how much paper we're copying. It's a fortune. The town's spending a fortune on all this paper for Plan Commission and BZA. He looked at the cost of all the printing, and he said that we can buy tablets for what it costs us to run about 3 or 4 months of printing at its current rate. In other words, we would recover the cost of buying tablets over the course of about 3 or 4 months by using tablets instead of making paper copies. So we are very much inclined to stop giving you all this paper. We would have tablets waiting for you at the DS. So when you come in for the meeting, you'd have the tablet waiting for you. So that we would supply the tablets. And it would be opened up, and it would be just something, you'd just be flipping through pages in the staff report and all into the business and so forth. So it'd be very simple, but we would not, yes.
Right now. Yeah, it
Yep,
works
yep,
pretty
that's
good.
right. And so it'd be waiting for you, but no more paper.
Can we request paper on certain petitions if we
That
desire
is
those?
really contrary to what we're trying to accomplish here.
And if you want paper, you
Yeah.
can print.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I'm just saying,
Which is-
the larger schematic.
Yeah,
I
okay, if it's a
can't
large
print
format,
landscape.
yes, you certainly let us know, and we can accommodate that.
Okay.
But yeah, the big goal here, there's cost efficiencies and just wasting, all the resources with all that
Right.
paper and ink and so forth.
I will always have the project file with me,
Okay,
and it's paper. So if there's ever a question for the big schematic plans or big civil drawings, they're here with me, so we can take a look at those.
And that's more of a plan commission thing typically than a
Yeah.
BZA.
and that's where my mind is, kind of looking from the planning commission side of it.
Mhm. Okay.
Files as well.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and, we'll talk to the plan commission too, but we're gonna do this. Yeah, we're not asking, we're gonna just go ahead and do this.
As he's considering technology,
It is wasteful.
this doesn't ever work.
Yeah.
Like ever.
Some do, some don't, because this one here was working.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that screen and projector are pretty much wholly unhelpful because it needs a brighter bulb to be able to see the content, and the screen needs to be a 10-foot screen, not a 7-foot screen.
And these
So,
screens are useful for the people
Yeah.
out there, but
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
So I think that-
You guys can't see them
I think
all,
if he
can
wants
you?
to use some of that savings in paper to do a few more technology upgrades, a
A
screen
nice
and
big
a,
real screen.
screen and a projector would be great,
And
a
there's
better one.
there's some question about size of tablet too, because it needs to be a large enough tablet that it's viewable.
okay,
And I don't mean this, but I
Uh-huh.
also don't mean that.
okay.
So, obviously,
Yeah, I think that'd be awesome.
What is the size? Does anyone know offhand what size tablet is desirable?
Well,
The dimensions?
And
What
that's
is
just
it?
an-
What are
It's
the
an iPad.
yeah.
iPads?
It's an iPad Pro. yeah.
iPad size is fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
iPad size would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're.
Just
they're
not the
various
iPad
sizes.
mini.
Well,
The mini.
I should say the standard size
Yeah,
iPad.
standard
Well, they're
size,
13
not the
and
little
15
one.
inch
I will
iPads,
say,
so-
many of you are already using your personal tablets. You can continue to do so if that is your preference, but we will have some to provide for you,
That'd be
right?
great.
So if you don't have one, don't worry about it. If you use your personal tablet and that's what you're familiar with, you can continue to do that.
Sure. Speaking of planning commission, are we going to get a revised definition for hardship?
It goes to plan.
And
it
come
goes-
through us so we can have a good interpretation before the next.
So, well, it goes to Plan Commission on the 17th. And so we would have to approve it, and then it's my understanding it goes to council. So then council's got to approve it. I would say, could we request that if Plan Commission approves it, that it gets sent to BZA members so they can at least
Quick.
Sure.
be aware of all that language so that if and when town council does approve it, the BZA members have had a little bit of a chance to catch up to where Plan Commission is.
Yes, and the council may well ask, well, has the BZA seen this? So we want to be able to
Yeah.
respond affirmatively.
Yeah, so the
Look
other
at it.
question is that, if you may remember, we had a discussion about changing some of our policies and procedures, and that's also still in the works. So hopefully at our next meeting, or before our next meeting, we'll have
Yeah.
some.
No, without
kind of
jumping into weeds and
a
creating
draft.
excuses, our team has been busy, to say the least. And,
Well, you know, you
we-
could have not taken vacation.
I know, and
12 hours a day
I
is
put
not
our
that problem.
team at a disadvantage. I did, I'll admit it.
So I have to tell you, I personally am very thankful that you talked the guy out of the barn dominium, because I didn't know how that was gonna go down. So I just, thank you very
Well-
much that was rethought, but.
To put it in a nutshell, Jody and Roger are working on some rules and procedure changes for Plan Commission. And because we like to keep things as simple as possible, we want the rules for Plan Commission and BZA to reflect each other as closely as possible. There will be a few deviations here and there, but we want them to mirror each other as much as possible, just to keep it simple. Long story short, I told y'all we were just gonna have a couple of minor tweaks to the BZA rules. Well, the Plan Commission rules are getting a good overhaul as well. And I decided that rather than do this twice, let's just pause for a second for Plan Commission's rules to be solidified. And then once Jody finalizes those, I will take that document, make it applicable to the BZA, and then you guys will get an opportunity to take a look at that as well. So it'll have more than just one or two red lines, I anticipate, which is a little different than what I originally pitched to you the first time, but it's still in the works, so be prepared for that. And we'll get it to you as soon as possible.
Great,
Awesome.
thank you.
Is there any further business for the board? If not, then
Move to adjourn.
stand adjourned.
Second.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, it's not midnight, so that's good.
Yeah, it's,